Have you had any training in computer technology from the IBM technology or this IBM compatible or Macintosh type of computer systems?
I never had any formal training in genealogy or computer work, and I just did it in my own scheme of things to get the things entered in a manner that I thought would be easily retrievable.
Have you had any genealogy expert from the world or the Evansville area or the Indiana area give you advice on how to create genealogical research?
Oh yes, I had a professor from the UV who once served Evansville but has been transferred away, but he was Dr. Van Aken, and he showed me many things about the genealogy research and set up my thing in a formal manner so that I could do it, retrieve what I did, see it twice over, and have it captured in my scheme.
Have you had any formal training in history?
The only part that I had in history was what the teachers taught back in school days, and that's not quite in my forte here. Even though it's not foreign to my work, it does not all fit, because my research has been people, more so people of Evansville, and of course historians, they are more people of events, and mine was people of people.
In the study of history, we look at major events in civilization. Your study of history talks about the individual people. In your research cards, your research, did you show, how do you show history in those cards?
I think the biggest touch of history in my studies and in my card system of recording activities is when I record a man and his events. I oftentimes show where he worked and how he lived in that manner, which every card would have a different thing on there. And besides having different people who was the man's own family, it would have a different segment of employment that he did, and it would show if he had a technical ability, or if he had a PhD or an MD, or just worked in a factory or worked as a clerk. I tried to put into the studies of what the person did who I was entering research on.
So when you did this history research, the bottom part of your card, which is the last, there's 15 fields in your cards, the bottom part of the card includes person's occupation, hobbies, and avocations. How are those important in understanding man's walk in life?
I feel that is an important step in a biography of a person. Not only are they a person on this globe, and they have a family, a wife and a family, then they also contributed to events. Maybe not a major contributor, but everybody helps this activity of life go on, and maybe he's just a factory worker or a professional worker, but that's how I feel that he should be entered into the studies. What did he do?
Did you give preference in your work to people that are famous people, or did you give an equal preference to all individuals walking this globe?
I thought the greatest study is common man. Whoever the people are on this globe, whatever they might do or whoever they might be, equally important to the events of life as the men who rose to high office. The men who rose to high office, they are individuals on an individual scheme. And there's nothing wrong with that. Does great things too, but everybody helped to push this world event forward in their own manner, be it little or big.
On people of notoriety in the world in our Evansville scene, you gave them equal credit to the man that was a common laborer or a professor all men were treated and women were treated equal in regards to your logging them in the history books?
Well, that takes a little study on that, because everybody who did something, and those who did many, many things, they're bound to be entered more thoroughly in my work, just because that's the way it appears in their history of life. And all the common man, even though I would like to get all of them in there, they may not have much study or much reference referred to them. And so by the nature of events, one who does more or who was big on the world scene is going to get a bigger entry and a bigger amount of contributions, whereas the man who didn't do many, many things in life, or if anything, they can't be escalated up in bigger entries.
The history of mankind is defined as historical events recorded over time. How have your cards helped record the history of mankind for individuals in Evansville?
Well, I thought as this study continued that those people who worked at a place in Evansville like Serville, that would appear on their study that they worked in Serville, and that would continue through the years. Then Serville, one time Evansville's greatest employer, faded out of the scene, and so that employment of people at Serville will consequently fade out of the scene. But not really, because even though Serville may phase out from the Evansville scene, the person who made his livelihood by working there and contribute to the manufacture of refrigeration would live a long number of years after Serville disappeared. So in their biography, Serville would appear. So even though it shows Serville as the main employer in this city, it won't isolate them down as to when they were, because each person who did work there could well live another 20, 30, 40 years after that company leaves. So even though I tried to make that play a prominent part in mankind's contribution, it also has to be on the scene for a long time and then disappear, and the person who worked there, who played a role there, could live a long time after the company has gone. So I can't really say that by putting in their medium work, it will really pin down to when that company was here, even though it will show in the study.
In the history section of your cards, part of it is employment. How does employment make a difference in these cards and tell us about the history of Evansville?
Well, I feel like it does. In the early study of people in studying biographies, use that system to get an idea and a range of why they might die. There were places of employment throughout our history that were proved to be dangerous. Coal mine, for instance, they would inhale into their system a lot of the black dust of coal, and that became later on known as the black lung. But that was a physical happening that took place really in the early days, unbeknownst that it was a detriment to man's life, and that is why that is researched in biographies in the early days. And it still is one of the reasons why they look into that, to see if the place of manufacturing, the place of employment, is detrimental to their health.
Your history section of your cards talks about employment, hobbies, and other types of walks of people's life. On the employment issue, how is employment information helpful in telling us about our city, besides Serville, besides Whirlpool, besides Toyota, besides General Electric, besides Alcoa? How does it tell us about the walk of man in the city?
Well, those that you cited were major features, of course, and everybody has some type of employment, be it on Main Street or be it in their own properties that they might own in the countryside. As a farmer, he would be subject to staying on his own property all his days, and a clerk on Main Street would become employed as a clerk, and as the years roll, you would find him as a clerk in one store, and then maybe a few years later in another store, so that becomes a medium of employment, and it becomes the scheme of that man's life.
So as we trace man's history in Evansville, people walk, live, and die in this city. Some may be exposed. It may be what we call the nurture and nature phenomenon. Nature is how we are born and talks about our genealogy. Nurture talks about our upbringing and our exposure to different chemicals, different walks of life. How is your card study helpful in retrospect, telling phenotypic information about individuals in our society?
It could be helpful that whoever would research my paperwork or my card system, but the real thing is the place in Baltimore that watches all over the United States to see